Since the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, the country has been technically at war with its direct neighbor in the north, Syria. But that might be changing any minute. Let me give you a little context. For more than 50 years, Syria had been governed by the brutal Assad regime. And for the final 15 years of that regime, the country was involved in a bloody civil war between multiple factions that resulted in 600,000 deaths and 13 million Syrians displaced. But on December 8th of 2024, the Assad regime was overthrown and a new leader rose to power in this war-torn country. And this completely changed the calculus for Israel. To better understand this terrain and the forces shaping it, we walked with Miri Eisin, a retired IDF colonel who is internationally recognized as an expert on intelligence, security, and the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. We walked with her on the Golan Heights along Israel's northern border with Syria.
Here we are in the north. We have these huge vistas just way out in front of us.
Isn't it amazing that on the one hand you have the view and on the other hand you have the minefields?
Right.
So we're looking down into minefields. It's the most heavily minefield fortified area in the world, aside from North and South Korea.
This area is just littered with mines.
It's all minefields.
This is all minefields
It's
that are
a remnant. They're being removed, but it's a remnant that we still can see between Israel and Syria. This was an area of battles. 67, 73.
And for context, this is the Syrian border, right? I mean, this is pretty close.
We're as close as we can get to it. In between us and the border are minefields, anti-tank ditches, a lot of different fortifications and bases, but it's directly in front of us. We're looking deep into Syria.
Why hasn't Israel gotten rid of the mines? I mean, we have all this modern technology. Literally, there are drones flying around us right now while we have this conversation.
When it's an Israeli minefield, you're going to have a map that shows how it was placed. It's different types of mines. There's anti-tanks, there's anti-personnel. Israel from 2009 is actually signed on the international demining treaty. Just by the way, the United States is not signed on it. Israel is. And we've been removing minefields, not just in the Golan Heights, but mainly in the Golan Heights over the last 15 years. So we are demining. The last place that we'll get to is going to be the ones that are right on the border. And we're looking right now directly into the border area. So you see the international sign for minefields, which is that inverted triangle. You can see the mines directly in front of us. So the idea, yes, it's evolved into something very different, but that's the international sign. And because Israel removes minefields, you get in between the minefields, by the way, also anti-tank ditches and all sorts of berms that are below us, you suddenly get fields that have mainly vineyards because there's really good wine here.
So basically there are vineyards all around massive minefields filled still with active mines, technically speaking.
Until really just a few years ago, on the other side of the border, you had a horrific dictatorship that was there for 54 years, and that dictatorship was at war in Israel as Syria was at war in Israel from 1948. That never changed. And in this area here...
For context, by the way, when you say there was a dictatorship, just remind the viewers of who was this dictator, what was the dictatorship?
So Syria itself, from 1970 for 54 years, was under the dictatorship of the Assad family.
Gotcha.
Hafez al-Assad, the son Bashar al-Assad. That's 54 years of a dictatorship. That's a very long time. Then they specifically ruled over Syria in a horrible way. Not that there's a nice dictatorship. I was following Syria pretty much from 1981 and onward in my military career. So what did it look like? It meant that the main forces of the country were for against domestic insurgency. It means that if you have an opinion and you want to say something against the dictator, you're not only arrested, you're not only put in jail, and you're tortured, and usually you're not let out. Over the years, when this dictatorship was overthrown in December of 2024, they went into prisons where people had
This
been
was recently.
held-
This was only a few months ago.
This was only a few months ago.
Right.
They went into prisons where people had been held for 40 years. Their families had no idea what had happened to them for 40 years, and they were in holes in the ground. They were held in the most horrific conditions. But, Ellie, they tried to achieve nuclear capability. In Syria, they built a North Korean nuclear reactor. Israel,
Wait, they built a North Korean nuclear reactor in Syria?
in Syria, they wanted to attain nuclear capability, and it was the type of nuclear reactor that is only for military use. This isn't the kind where we're talking about nuclear medicine or
Sure.
something of the sort.
And by the way, this is the same regime that did create chemical weapons and used those chemical weapons recently.
Against their own people.
Right.
They found in jails 150,000 people that had been murdered in jails in the decades of the dictatorship.
150,000 people.
That's just killed that they found.
And that's just in jails.
And that's just in jails.
What has been the relationship between Israel and Syria until now? What's happened and what's happening now?
So from 1948, when Syria attacked Israel, Syria has been in a state of war against Israel for 54 years. That against Israel was led by the dictator's family, Hafez al-Assad, and then his son Bashar al-Assad.
Sure.
You have many years where, because Israel and Egypt signed a peace treaty, Syria felt that they were alone. And when I say that they were alone, they built on their side of the border enormous fortifications, lots of different capabilities, and they backed proxies in this area, mainly Hezbollah.
Really? So Syria was backing Hezbollah?
They were. And Hezbollah was participating with Bashar al-Assad in the civil war, because that horrific dictatorship that was overthrown December 8th, but in 2024, but that horrific dictatorship was contested, if I can put it in those terms, from 2011.
From
And we would
2011?
From 2011, for almost a decade, we would look into
Right.
Syria, and it was a question of who's on the other side. Is it the pro-Bashar forces, or is it the anti-Bashar forces?
I see.
The forces against Bashar were Sunni, Arabic-speaking, together with non-Arabic-speaking Sunnis. And what ended up inside the not very civil war inside Syria.
For those that are confused about what Sunni and Shia is.
Okay. The Muslim world in general is split between Shiites and Sunnis. Each recognizes the other as Muslim, but it's
Okay.
different ways to practice the religion. Bashar al-Assad and his father are of a Shiite subgroup. And in the Muslim world in general, around 90% are Sunni and around 10% are Shiite. Just so that we know, Iran is Shiite.
Okay.
And yes, that has to do with the characterizations of the area. And Syria as a country has over 60% Sunni, and they were ruled by a Shiite minority. They were ruled very cruelly.
The Assad regime, they're in control of Syria for 40-something years, correct?
54
54 years. 54 years.
altogether.
When was the beginnings of this revolt? When did that really start?
So it started in 2011. In 2011, there were all sorts of revolts against different authoritative
This is what's
figures.
become known as the Arab Spring, correct?
Yes,
And the fall of Gaddafi, if I'm not wrong?
The fall of Gaddafi, the fall of Mubarak in Egypt. Tunisia then ousted their president.
So all
Yemen
these
ousted
countries
their
are
president.
ousting presidents and dictators around the world, but then in Syria, what happens there? That's
Well, not only in Syria, a lot of them ended up in civil wars. Libya has been in a civil war ever since. Yemen has been. In Syria, they tried to oust the bad dictator, Bashar al-Assad.
Right.
What happened in Syria is that it didn't work the same way as in other places. It wasn't everybody against Bashar, meaning
Gotcha.
Hezbollah came in to help him. That was a huge issue.
sure.
The Iranians came in to help him. That was a huge issue.
So Iran and Hezbollah, they're jumping in with Assad. I think Russia at some point jumped in the mix.
That was the defining point, I would say, in that sense. That was the stage where really Bashar, with Hezbollah and Iran and the Russians, managed to, I'm going to say, quell lots of different Sunni rebel groups. I call it
Right.
a Sunni rebellion, a Syrian rebellion. A lot of outer forces came into Syria to support the Syrians in that rebellion. But I have to say, it wasn't that it was the good guys against the bad guys. I'm very challenge when people ask me about the Syrian civil war. First of all, it wasn't civil. And a lot of Sunni jihadi forces, when I say jihadi, I'm talking about Al-Qaeda, I'm talking about the Islamic State, and I'm talking about lots of other Sunnis. They're not all Al-Qaeda.
So basically, ISIS is involved in this civil war. You've got Hezbollah involved in this civil war. You have, I mean, these are extremist groups, and they were all involved within this civil war as well.
Ellie, they were right on the other side of our border, which is not funny, okay? Because literally, on the other side of the border was an area where we would watch the Bashar forces with Hezbollah against the Al-Qaeda forces. And the head of those Al-Qaeda forces, the man who established those Al-Qaeda forces, is the man right now that we all call President Ahmed Shara of Syria, same guy as Abu Muhammad Al-Julani. Julani, we're walking on the Golan. Julani. And we started to look him up because he founded an Al-Qaeda Syria group that was one of many groups that were established.
So this guy was cut right out of Al-Qaeda. That was his group. He was extremist. There was no question to it.
You want to say no question. He had sat in U.S. jails in Iraq.
So this guy was arrested
from 2006 to 2011. And when the United States left Iraq in 2011, most of those jails, the people were let out. He was one of the ones let out. He sat for 5 years in a jail in Iraq.
This guy who's in charge of a serious faction within this Syrian revolt or this rebellion, civil war, he was part of the American prison system at some point. He was incarcerated under terrorism charges, we're talking? This is like...
Yes, he was. And until very recently, as in 2025, there was a $10 million bounty. I mean, how do you call that? On his head. People can look it up. We can show it afterwards to show that piece of paper that shows him. He looks at that time, because he doesn't anymore. I'll say otherwise. He dressed at the time just like Osama bin Laden. Can you think of Osama bin Laden with that turban and the dress? That's exactly how he was dressed. And in 2011, he came to Syria after he was let out of jail. And he established as a Syrian, as an Arabic-speaking Syrian, the Syrian Al-Qaeda affiliate.
But just before we go too far down this road, during this civil war, this is a brutal civil war. I mean, everything I remember about this war, it was all over the headlines. There were mass amounts of people fleeing the country as refugees.
What were the biggest issues? So at least officially, over 6 million Syrians left.
6 million Syrians left the country.
A very large amount arrived in Europe, mainly in Germany, a little under 1 million. And that's one of the reasons that Germany right now is head first into the new regime, because it's a domestic issue in Germany. But I don't know that people know that there are 3 million Syrians who went to Turkey, over 1 million that went to Jordan, over 1 million that went to Lebanon. So it was a destabilizing factor.
And when these people did this, they lost everything. They were fleeing with whatever they had on them, right?
I mean, they were just... over on the other side, and we would watch the battles, and it was just utter destruction. The country called Syria, over that time period, was utterly destroyed, place after place. And for a while, in 2016, 17, 18, it stabilized. But when I say stabilized under the horrific dictator, the one who used chemical weapons, who continued to arrest people.
By the way, on both sides of us here, these are landmines, correct?
These would mainly be anti-personnel mines, because in a lot of these areas, it's both anti-tank and anti-personnel.
From what I've heard, every year, some of these mines go off, like, you know, cows are blowing up every so often. You got these bizarre...
It does happen. It takes a heavy-duty wild boars, lots of wild boars in these areas.
Sure.
A cow will make an anti-tank mine go off. That's how heavy a cow is.
Wow.
We, human beings, would not make an anti-tank mine go off. Not that I'd want to step on it.
But there are personnel mines here.
But they're anti-personnel mines. And those
these are dangerous.
Blow off a leg. They are anti-infantry. That's part of the protection.
So let's then go back to who's in charge of Syria now. So
because of the October 7th war, because Hezbollah joined in, and because Israel went preemptively against Hezbollah that had been firing rockets, drones, missiles and mortars into Israel from October 7th. We went to dismantle that. Hezbollah is the one that was propping up Bashar al-Assad.
You're really making the statement here that to some degree the fall of Assad really has to do with Israel's
action against Hezbollah. And when it happened, it was very fast. It was 10 days, and everybody was like, after 13 years.
Well, that's what I was thinking. It was so
days.
quick. 10 days later, this dictatorship is completely... It didn't even look like they tried. They just kind of drove in, and it was over. They just...
So it seems that the pro-Bashar forces ran away. The pro-Bashar forces decided to stop and not be there. And the Assad family themselves were hoisted out very quietly.
Bashar Assad
in
himself
the night. He's in
ran
Moscow.
off to Russia. I mean, like...
He's there. His family is there. They've seen his father there, his brother there. Let's add into this wonderful family and what a dictatorship is.
Right.
Syria became a narco-state. When I say a narco-state, people don't understand what I mean.
Sure,
It made officially in its pharmaceutical factories drugs that it exported. There's a drug called Captagon,
Yeah.
which has become...
This was the October 7th drug that many of the Hamas members were on when they were
That was
committing their
one of the
atrocities, correct?
aspects. It's come up from there. But we're talking about a major export that was the income for the Assad regime. And right now, this new regime, under same guy, Abu Muhammad Al-Julani, we know him now as Ahmed
This is this
al-Shara.
fringe guy who was running an Al-Qaeda operation.
So he, in 2016-17, when Bashar was like reestablishing himself after 5 years of a very bloody war, Abu Muhammad Al-Julani, divorced Al-Qaeda. Can I put it that way?
He divorced Al-Qaeda.
Listen, it's the greatest. It's one of my favorite pictures ever where
Wait a minute.
he divorced. He did it very officially.
What does it mean to divorce a radical Islamic group?
You do a press conference.
Okay.
And you say, Al-Qaeda, I love you. You're great. It's not about you.
It's not you, it's me?
about me.
He does the "it's not you, it's me" to Al-Qaeda.
He did the "it's not you, it's me." He said, what I want to do is to oust Bashar. And so it's not because Al-Qaeda is against all Western values, everything Western, the United States, Israel, the world. But what he established then, and he did it a few times in a row, is he established other organizations, and slowly, Ellie, I was watching him, he became less and less religious.
But did he always start as this radical? Was he always...
He was born into what I'm going to call a Sunni secular family. His father was in the oil industry, worked in Riyadh. He lived in Riyadh. And then they lived in
So he was like an
Damascus.
aristocrat in a certain sense. He was a little bit of an oligarch.
He didn't. He wasn't the Saudi oil. He was working in the oil industry, the father.
Okay.
And Ahmed al-Shara, late in high school, became more and more religious. You could actually write a textbook about how going into the mosque, getting more religious, becoming more extreme, and how then you recruit you into Al-Qaeda. And that's something that he's done over the years. And what's been interesting has been seeing how he's come out of it. Meaning, you look at him now, and he went from going into military garb,
Sure.
into not having the head covering, into not having the different religious garb, into now, look at him in his Armani suits and ties.
True. What are the possibilities of what Syria could become, especially in relation to Israel? Are we looking at a possibility of peace, sort of like Jordan and Egypt? Or is it going to go, I mean, this guy's a radical. What do we think?
We don't know if he's a radical. The new regime right now is doing all the right things. When I say right things, it's talking about all the people of Syria. It's being inclusive. Having said that, it's still sidelining some of them. Let's put it this way. I'm hopeful and I'm guarded. And that's the way I think that anybody in Israel is going to be after October 7th. There's a possibility that this new regime will not be an enemy of Israel. That doesn't make it a friend, but it won't be an enemy. That's going to be amazing.
That could be a very exciting time.
Totally.
Wow. Thanks, Miri. Thanks for walking with us.
Hey, what
really
a place
appreciate
to
it.
walk in. I love it.
In a region where borders are fluid and power is fragile, the Golan remains a pressure point, physically mined and politically volatile. Miri reminded us that regimes may rise and fall, but geography doesn't change. Syria is a fractured country that after 14 years of civil war is now made up of ethnic groups and clans and ideological groups that do not always get along. What has become clear is that the border with Israel that has largely remained quiet in recent years may not stay that way. The stakes aren't theoretical. This could be an unprecedented time of peace, or a misstep, or a misread, or a miscalculation could redraw the map once again. I'm Eli Katzoff, and this is Through the Land.